Welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please welcome your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show, the only internet radio show dedicated to giving you real solutions to improve your health. Not only are they real solutions, but they're natural solutions as well, because as you know, the one and only true wealth you have is your health. I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc, and I'm committed to helping you find the root cause of your health problem, fix the cause with natural treatments so you can feel normal again and live your life to the fullest. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before I introduce today's special guest. I'm happy to announce my first book is now in print. The title is Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again, Fixing the Root Cause of Your Fatigue with Natural Treatments. I've discovered 14 root causes of fatigue. I like to call them the fatigue factors, and in this book, I explain 8 out of the 14. I've had some amazing feedback on how easy it is to read and understand. It's not full of technical doctory language like most books written by doctors are. And of course, the book also includes my own personal fatigue story, along with 4 other stories from real fatigue cases from my private practice. It's available in paperback and Kindle forms, so if you'd like a copy, you can find it on Amazon or on my website, www.drcarri.com. That's it for our housekeeping, so let's get started. I'm so very excited to introduce you to today's special guest because he's just a regular guy who decided to really take charge of his health. His name is Mike Wendland. So let me tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike's actually a longtime media guy, and he's written for many national newspapers, including USA Today and the New York Times. And he's also a travel writer who has traveled around North America in an RV looking for cool stories about people and places. And he's using his blog and podcast to chronicle exactly what's happened to him since he started to exercise and abandon his junk food diet. And now he's eating, good, organic, nutritious food. So today he's going to share with us his adventure, revealing his weight changes, his struggles, his successes, and what he's learning and experiencing through his new emphasis on health and fitness. So, Mike, I want to thank you so much for being my special guest today on this episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show.
Well, it is a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Carri.
So, Mike, can you share with us what was your real aha moment that made you make this 180-degree turn in your health?
Well, like a lot of people, I have struggled with my weight for my whole life. I've yo-yoed up and down. And I've always, said, oh, you just got to go without, don't eat, cut back. And anybody can lose weight that way for a while. But then it would always come back, and then it would go off, and then it would come back. And one day, a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I picked up the movie Supersize Me. I don't know if you saw that, the Morgan Spurlock movie, where he decided that as an experiment he'd do a video to see what would happen if he only ate fast food. I think he did it from McDonald's, and at the end of whatever that was, 30, 60, 90 days, I don't remember how long, he was so sick that literally his physician advised him to stop the experiment. It was just amazing watching these changes. He was just eating, the stuff that most Americans eat all the time, the easy, convenient, comfort food of greasy hamburgers and fast food French fries. And his thing is every time they said supersize, he would take the extra size, and that was it. And he gained tons of weight. He was unhealthy. But anyway, it got me wondering, what would have happened if he did the opposite? If he started to exercise, to work out, and if he decided that it would be, see what happens if he ate right, if he ate good food, healthy food. And so that's how this all started. I realized I had to do a life change, not another diet. And it began in all, I've lost, I mean, when I first started this a couple, 3 years ago, I hate to say this, but I was 262 pounds, and I've lost about 40 pounds of that. And because I do a lot of travel writing, it started to creep back up again this summer. And I said, I'm going to do more than that then. And so I came up, instead of supersize me, I came up with the name Super Healthy Me. And that's the name of the blog and the podcast. And I'm trying to be, it's really a secret for me to be accountable. So if I'm accountable and do a podcast every week where I share what's happened with me, it better be good. And so that's my audience is my accountability partner.
So that was really the big aha moment, was seeing that movie.
That was it. It really did. And then that led me to, as you said in the introduction, I am an investigative reporter, and that's what I've done most of my life. And that led me to, well, what about food? And I've read all the other stuff that's out there, Forks Over Knives and King Corn and Food Inc. And I started to get really mad about the food industry. And then last year, Michael Moss, New York Times reporter, came out with a book called Salt, Sugar, and Fat, and how the food giants of America have addicted us, to food that is just not healthy for us, particularly high fructose, sugary concoctions that are more addictive than cocaine. And so I got really upset. Those aha moments continued on. And then the real aha moment was about 6 months ago. I mean, I knew I was on the right track, but about 6 months ago, we were in a supermarket, and I looked, and this supermarket had row after row of motorized scooters and little things that handicapped folks would use, except these were not for handicapped. These were the people who were using these scooters were just morbidly obese people who were too fat to waddle down the aisles of these supermarkets and eat this, select this toxic food that was being offered to us. And so I looked at that and I said, this is just nuts. And that's really when I completely sold out to this idea of trying to be a super healthy me by eating right and exercising.
And so can you tell us about some of the ups and the downs, the struggles and the wins that you've gotten on your journey? Because it's not an easy journey.
No, it is not an easy journey. No, it is for some people. Some people, are right there. I guess the first successful thing that I have learned is I started to watch what fit people eat, and it's markedly different than what obese people eat. I mean, really, you just watch them. They'll take a couple of bites of something. They'll have a small serving, and so that was my first successful thing. That the downside for me is after a lifetime of this, I'm in my 60s, and after a lifetime of bad eating habits, I was strung out on all this stuff, on this sugary, good tasting, easy to get food that did not do well for me. And I ate more than I should have. I used to say I had no such thing as a full mechanism, and I still will struggle with that. In times that I'm eating something that's good, if it's good now, more is even better. And you become unaware that you're full, that you really don't need any more food until it starts to hurt. So I've learned to eat slower, and I've learned to practice portion control. I mean, no one's perfect. I went off the wagon at Thanksgiving, and in Thanksgiving week, I got on the scales. I was 5 pounds up. And that was very depressing until I realized that that's because I had a ton of carbohydrates, and there was a lot of water retention involved. And that weight went right away very fast as soon as I got back on my healthy eating program.
And so some of the things that you've mentioned are things that most of our listeners, they know about, that they should be doing, or they're trying to do, or that they are struggling with. And so you mentioned about healthy eating and about exercising. So what do you think has been the biggest thing that has impacted you now maintaining this healthy lifestyle? Is it the diet? Is it exercise? Or is it your mindset?
Well, I think it is a little bit of all of that, but the latter, the mindset, is the most important thing. It's a decision. It's like, here's a little exercise I did. And this really helped. I took a yardstick, and it or actually it was a tape measure that kind of went, it was like a 10-foot tape measure, whatever that was. And I put it on the ground. I put my foot on my age, and then I said, how much longer, realistically, in assuming I don't get in an accident or I don't come down with a terrible disease, how much longer can I expect to live? And so, just arbitrarily, I put like 89. I come from a family of long livers, and, and that's great. So, I don't know. I put 89, but at least at 89, I'm going to be slowing down. I know that. So that's not that much room. Everything else is in the past. I can't do anything about the past. Can't do a thing about it. But everything from the date I was standing on, which was, my current age, to where I would be, at 89 in a grave or close to it. Hopefully even longer than that now. I think I can actually go into my 90s. But that's not a lot of different. That's not a lot of inches in that little yardstick. And so every minute counts. And so the past is done. The future's still there, and the future will get longer the more healthy I am. And so that really has helped me. And that's that mindset I have. And sure, you mess up. I mean, I will confess without any guilt at all that just before we started this interview, this is the holiday time when we're recording it, I had a Christmas cookie. And I don't feel any guilt at all because I'm not going to have 10 of them. I had one. And that's great. It's a special time of year. No problem, because tomorrow I won't, and I know I've still got some more time to eat during the day, another meal, and I can make sure I don't overindulge in any of that stuff. And so it's kind of a long-term approach, but realizing that I want every day to be a little bit better.
So you had mentioned earlier that there's been some movies out there. So besides Supersize Me, which was just an awesome movie because it really got out there to the mainstream. Morgan Spurlock did such a great job with that movie. So for any listeners who have not seen that movie yet, you have got to get it. And then you mentioned King Corn. I know I've seen that one, and that really pissed me off.
Yeah.
And Forks Over Knives, and there's so many other documentaries out there.
The one that it's a book, it's not a movie now, but the book that has most infuriated me is this Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. I mean, first you'll get really mad at the food industry, and you realize how they have conspired. I mean, there's no doubt they have conspired to load our food with unhealthy, even toxic junk that it has one purpose only, and that is to addict us to sugar, to salt, and to fat. And then, of course, you get mad at yourself for allowing yourself to get hooked. But finally, you realize the key to your beating this obese lifestyle is in the food choices you make, that we really do have the power. And I guess if you get no other book about food, that's the one I would recommend. I think that Salt, Sugar, Fat, it's great. He's a great journalist, and he went inside the food industry in many of their meetings and many of the tests and how they intentionally load this food with salt and sugar and fat to addict us. And I think that there's been some great reporting out there by journalists and documentarians, film documentarians, and Food Inc. was another big one that really does it. And I do a lot of traveling around the country in a little RV, and Food Inc. exposes how the nation's food supply is controlled by really a handful of corporations, and that the way they artificially they load up our cattle with antibiotics, and they raise all the chickens in windowless rooms, and I mean, just unhealthy ways. And we've gone by those feedlots as we've traveled around the country, and we've seen these cows, this cattle all packed together in feces-covered muddy grounds with no grass or grain, and they're fed instead corn. And it's disgusting. And yet that's what most of us eat. And most of us never knew that. We never knew that. And so I got real mad. And I just said, no, I'm not going to let them do that to me anymore. And I'm not going to do it to myself anymore.
So, one of the things I really love about your story is that, again, you're just a regular guy. But sometimes people, when they hear about these stories about the food industry, I think sometimes they think it's like blown out of proportion, or it's like more of a conspiracy theory. But you being a longtime journalist, media guy, and really traveling the country, you have been able to see firsthand that this is not a conspiracy theory. These things are happening.
Here's something that anybody can do, and you just cannot help but connect the dots. My father-in-law died a year and a half or so ago, and he's one of those guys from the World War II generation, and he was in his 90s. And we were clearing out some of his stuff, and we came across a lot of the photos that he had collected from his days in the Navy, and then his days as a young dad and growing up. And what was so striking about these photos, and these photos were from the 40s and the 50s, is how fit everyone looked. There were no grossly morbidly obese people in any of the photos they took of their friends or the places they went. And I thought, well, look at that. Look how fit everybody was. And then we started thinking about it, and we think about the old movies that we watch, those old black and white movies. There's not fat people in them. Or if they are, they're presented as kind of a caricature and a ridiculous figure. Most people in those movies in the 40s and the 50s were fit, thin. They ate good food. That's why. What changed it? Here's what changed it. I saw a photo just the other day. I was in a Dairy Queen. I admit I like Dairy Queen. I was in a Dairy Queen, and they had an old photo from the early 60s, I think it was, maybe the late 50s, when it was of the first Dairy Queen that opened in some little town, wherever that was. And it was a great shot. There's some old cars, and there was a lot of people around, and there was somebody out in front of the Dairy Queen giving a little speech. But all the people gathered around were fit. They all looked really trim and good. Now, you contrast that to just look anywhere today. Go to a shopping mall, anywhere, and just look. And look how many people are way overweight. What's changed? Well, what's changed is big food, fast food, bad for you food, science and research into how to put more addictive things into our food to make us buy more of them. I mean, travel around the country. I remember once thinking about potato chips. You don't see those in third world countries where people are fit. Now, granted, they don't have good nutrition there often, but it's our food. It's this diet that we eat. And that's the thing. You don't have to do an investigative story on the food industry to realize that something changed in our culture. And what has changed, I think, is the food we consume.
Yeah, I think you're right that is the biggest part, and that we're kind of like rats in an experiment.
That's just what we are. You're right. It's not a pleasant thought, but
it's real. I don't mean to bring this podcast down, but I want our listeners to understand that this is what's going on, and again, you being a journalist and experiencing the changes in your life, changing your diet, changing your exercise routine, and the big one, changing your mindset about health. So I'd like to switch gears, because one of the things that I often hear from patients, because patients come into my office for all different kinds of reasons, and some of them want to lose weight, some of them are struggling with autoimmune disease, some are struggling with diabetes, with heart disease, all kinds of different reasons. But universally, one of the things that we work on is diet and healthy eating. And so one of the things I'm often asked about is that eating healthy costs more. So, Mike, can you comment on that and what you have found?
Well, that is the scandal of it all, because it does. Frankly, it does cost a little bit more, and it takes more effort. But what's more important than our health? What is more important than living whatever that time on my illustration of the tape measure, from where you're standing today with your age until you won't be standing anymore, than to make every day a little bit better. And so it is going to cost you more. That is a scandal. I mean, fresh food costs more because it isn't preserved. It isn't loaded with these preservatives. There are a number of places now, a couple of big chains around the country where you can get organically grown fresh food. There is, I think, a very strong movement. Just search the internet. A lot of people are buying, grass-fed beef, for example, from a number of producers around the country, and they can go in on a cow, a processed cow if they're meat eaters. So there's ways to do it and to save money. There's co-ops, but the fact of the matter is, this is going to have to become more than just going to the supermarket and buying food. You're going to have to be proactive. we're used to that. We've seen this now in our health. We're told when we go to a physician's office, when we go to the hospital, to be proactive, to find out what's involved, to ask questions, and we have to do the same thing with what we eat. So, yep, you do pay more. And it has to almost become like a hobby for you, because you've got to learn how to read the ingredients, how they sneak stuff through there. And you've got to go out of your way to get organically grown, good, fresh, whole, unprocessed food. And you got to eat it a little quicker, because unprocessed food doesn't have a shelf life of 23 years, whatever they give.
Yeah.
But that is probably the scandal. It should be the other way around, but we live in a culture now where, it's pretty hard to, to ship food across the country and expect it to live and without preservatives in it. So, there is that cost. And of course, you've got the food industry, and you've got the government that basically endorse all this unhealthy stuff. And anybody who raises their voice in criticism is campaigns are launched against them to shut them down or to quiet them. But so you got to become a bit of an activist, but it's for your own cause, and you're going to pay a little bit more. But I think you'll also enjoy it more. There's a satisfaction of knowing that once you start eating good food, you feel better. It tastes better. We were out the other day, and I had turkey. I thought, well, it was a restaurant. I have some turkey. It would be good, white turkey. And I just tasted the salt in it. I mean, it was so salty. I had no idea. But because my taste buds have changed, I now recognize that stuff. Before, I just consumed it. It was normal.
So, Mike, can you give our listeners three good tips on maintaining a healthy lifestyle, whether it's some of the diet changes that you've implemented or exercise changes that you've implemented, or just simple mindset?
Sure. It's simple. These are simple tips. Okay, the first one, I think the most important one, at least for me, and again, everybody's lifestyle is different, but for my lifestyle, is I have a rule, and if I can at all keep it, I keep it. We do not eat after 6 p.m. because we intend to go to bed by 10 or 11. And if you just do a little bit of research, that's how much you need to digest that food. Otherwise, it just sort of sits there. And you have trouble sleeping. Your body's digesting the food instead of shutting down and letting you sleep. Most high-calorie food, the studies show, are consumed between 6 and 10 at night when people are watching television or just, they have some downtime. So if you set this rule that I will not eat, make it even 4 or 5 hours before I go to bed. If you go to bed at 2 a.m, you can eat up until a little later. But for us, it's 6 p.m. No food after 6 p.m. And man, the weight will come off right from there, and you'll feel better. You'll sleep better. That's the first step. The second tip is why you don't eat after 6, to sleep. How important sleep is to us. I've read some stories now about sleep, and I've talked to researchers that I did a couple of on my podcast about how sleep is actually the most important thing you can do if you really want to lose weight. That if you don't sleep, it does something to your metabolism. It causes you to want to eat more the next day, and it just messes everything up. And when I say sleep, that's 7 to 8 to 9 hours a night. So you need to really work on that, and it takes quite a commitment because it is really an issue for most people. People seem in our culture to almost take pride in the fact that they don't sleep. Oh, I get by with 4 hours of sleep. You're not getting by. It's going to take have a major effect on your health, and you probably have a weight problem because obesity is directly linked to a lack of sleep. So that's the second one. And then, as for exercise, find something you like, and find a whole bunch of things you like, and do different things, but work out 6 days a week, no matter what. 6 days a week. At least 30 minutes of cardio, and you should do some weightlifting. And there's lots of books, and you can find a health club and all of that stuff. I think everybody should join a gym someplace, and it doesn't have to be an expensive thing, but there's something about working out with a bunch of other people and finding exercise buddies to to go with. All that stuff is really important. So working out, getting enough sleep, and don't eat after 6 p.m.
Oh, I love those tips. And again, I'm sure most of our listeners have already heard of those things. You're not reinventing the wheel here, but really the brass tacks is when you sit down and you really focus on implementing these things in your life. And for one of the things for me personally, when it came to exercise, um, and I'm happy to be transparent about this with my audience, is that I have always hated exercising. When they say, "Oh, feel the burn," doesn't that burn feel so good? It's like, no, that burn doesn't feel good. And I don't even
Well,
like the way it feels when I stretch.
yeah,
And
I'm
so,
not a stretcher. I should. They tell us we really should. There's one other thing that I didn't mention, but it had to do with my lifestyle, which is, working on a computer a lot or driving in an RV a
yeah.
lot. And that's something called sitting disease. There really is such a thing. It's a genuine disease. The Center for Disease Control talks about it. We sit too much, and how difficult sitting disease. If you sit, it actually causes you. It wrecks your posture, and it makes you actually retain your calories more. You don't burn them, and it's like the equivalent of smoking a pack or two of cigarettes a day. It's bad news. So this idea of sitting all the time, so get up every hour or so, walk around, move around, right standing up, things like that.
Yeah, and it could be as simple as in your electronic calendar to put a meeting or an alert. Put your alarm on every hour to alert you that it's time to get up, move around,
Yeah,
and maybe even do a little bit of exercise in your office. Get down and do a plank for as long as you can, or just do a brisk walk around the office, or
doing that plank in the office would just be fun because people would walk by and see that and they'd freak out. What's happening to him? So that'd be kind of a great conversation starter. But yeah, just moving. My wife has a thing, steps, 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 she says, and that means get up and walk around and park a little further. These are all simple tips that everybody should know and probably has heard, but just implement them.
Mhm.
Walk farther. Don't go for that parking spot that's right next to the handicapped. Take one further back. Uh, don't run up the escalator. Take the stairs if you can. And every little step adds. And with these great apps that we have now on our smartphones, they'll count our steps, and you can measure yourself if you've got a competitive thing. I did 7,000 steps yesterday. I want to do 7,500 today, and you have to play games with yourself. And you have to think through. You got to plan what I'm going to eat. You're going out to a party. Okay, what am I going to have? I'm going to drink a lot of water ahead of time, and then I'm not going to eat the shrimp and the sauce, and I'm going to stay away from, all the pasta stuff. But maybe I can have some fruit. And you have to think it through.
Mike, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast? You had mentioned it early on at the beginning of our interview that you use that to help keep yourself accountable for your health. So can you mention again, what is the name of your podcast, and how can our listeners really find out more about you?
If they go to superhealthyme.com, that's all one word, superhealthyme, and just check that out. There's all the podcasts are there, and then I have some posts that we do throughout the rest of the week as well as I'm learning stuff. But the idea of the podcast is total transparency. That I will begin each show. I'll sort of talk about my week, and I will give the numbers of how much weight I lost, or whether I didn't lose any, or whether I did. I'll talk about the exercise. I always have an interview. You will be one of my interviews. As a matter of fact, we're swapping interviews here in the next couple.
Yeah. I like that we're able to swap interviews.
Yeah, well, it's great because we reach different audiences, and your expertise on functional medicine, and just we did our interview a couple of days ago, and it's helped me. It's helped to refocus me, and this idea that we can actually feel better.
Mike, I want to thank you for being my special guest today. This has really been an awesome interview. All right, that wraps up this very special episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show with Mike Wendland. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. And I'd like to invite you back next week for another episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please tell your friends about the Functional Medicine Radio Show, and we'll see you next week with more from Dr. Carri.